I just saw a video from Rossmann where he showed a clip of some cyber insecurity guy saying that he will rail against the idea of using the Google phones and Linux phones. This cyber guy says that thinking you need a Google phone is giving yourself self-importance. Yeah, he used that word several times. He says that if you are not an active activist and are not targeted by countries like the UAE and the NSO group, then you don't need anything other than an iPhone. Basically suggesting that you're not that important and don't need to worry about privacy. Then he flashes his iPhone because it's supposedly more secure and more private. And that's already a big mistake right there and discussed in many of my prior videos. Man, this kind of thought process, which I will frankly call idiotic, is like having the analytical skills of a child. And this is a guy giving cybersecurity advice. There are many such individuals in cybersecurity who know nothing about privacy. Thank you, Rossmann, for bringing this discussion up. This, by the way, is the same kind of thought process of every one of your friends that say, "I've got nothing to hide." Well, unfortunately, guys like this cyber guy and every other tech normie will doom us all because not understanding the issue is what will haunt us in the end, and we will be in tech slavery. We all deserve privacy. It is not about self-importance. We deserve privacy as individuals, and we deserve privacy as a society. If we do not have privacy, then you can give up even the related concepts like security, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and free expression. Let's get into it, my friends. Stay right there. First of all, the average normie doesn't even understand the extent of data collected by big tech about all of us. I will tell you right now that when Edward Snowden revealed in 2013 that the US intelligence community was doing mass surveillance on its own citizens, the amount of that data pales in comparison now to what big tech knows about each one of us. Well, more about some of you than others. You see, I refuse to participate in this feeding of big data to big tech. So less is known about me, and that's because I use a Google phone. And no, I'm not an important person. Unlike some of these people who pontificate on YouTube based on absolutely limited knowledge, before I did this social media crusade, I was also in the data collection business. In my case, I had experience with collecting your medical data and centralizing this data in various corporate health information exchanges. We also studied how to use the data to do what is called outcomes analysis, meaning studying the results of health behaviors and actions as they relate to medical outcomes and medical costs. I also saw how many people had access to this data, and this gave me the fear of what people can do with data. So heed what I say because it comes from a deeper understanding of the concerns. I will cover this privacy threat in two segments. First is about individual privacy, then I will cover society's privacy. Each has specific implications which are completely missed by the uneducated. You might ask what these privacy threats have to do with the Google phones. Well, as we will discuss later, the Google phones have a particular capability, and that is that it can hide your identity. And we will get into that later. In today's world, because we rely on the normie iPhone and Google Android, our every zucking move is tracked. It is so tracked that every location, every click on the internet, every social interaction, every communication, every idea in our heads is known to zucking big tech. Back when I was first discovering the extent of data available on social media sites like Zucking Zuckbuck, I already knew that I could find information about practically any person on the internet, regardless of so-called privacy settings. This already resulted in threats to many like doxing and stalking, and I witnessed attacks in social media where this was used to intimidate people with fear. We're talking at the level of strangers knocking on their door asking for sexual favors. Is someone caring about privacy for fear of these threats doing it because they think themselves self-important? But it goes beyond that. As individuals, this lack of privacy translates into a record of behavior, a record that is sold to third parties like employers and even the state. U.S. immigration will check your social media for your behavior. Many countries do this as well, like Australia and New Zealand. The state of New York will examine your social media now by law if you want a handgun license. You don't know what's in your total digital profile. Some things may be true, some may be exaggerated, some may be false. But unlike in a court of law, there is nothing to challenge this collection of data about you. As an individual, your lack of privacy means you get judged for mistakes made even 20 years ago. You are not allowed to change or mature. Even minor social mistakes will cost you a job or other business opportunity. Very soon, CBDC or the digital dollar will be foisted upon us by this current administration. Perhaps you don't even know that digital currencies are now the majority of daily transactions in China. All controlled in China by one app, WeChat. And in case you didn't know, WeChat is directly tied into the Chinese CCP. What this translates to is that the Chinese citizens' digital social profile is now connected to their financial access. So for convenience, the Chinese have ceded their rights to privacy to their government. Now there's no choice. Each individual must conform. There is a social score. Speak out against the government and you will be shut down. Financially, socially. The less information known about each of us, the less the possibility of a third party judging us. We are already judged currently by our credit scores. Some of you can't even rent good apartments because of your credit score. Can you imagine adding a social score to this? And I don't mean that you need an actual numeric score. Third-party aggregators of identifiable data already collect your information and sell it, including every place you've been, every idea you have expressed, and every person you've interacted with, including those that have not been of the best social standing. And know that your employer has likely seen this information. Those who think that Google, Facebook, Apple, and others have no reason to care about your data is at the utmost level of ignorance. So to highlight this, I will even give an example that is outside the usual suspects in big tech. Ever heard of the company Palantir? This company had a market capitalization of over 60 billion just a year ago. It is down significantly this year, but regardless, at one point the market thought it had significant value. Palantir is owned by Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal. In case you're wondering what Palantir's line of business is, well, they're in data mining. They basically collect all the data you have in the internet, and they apparently think that having this information is so useful that they had a market cap of 60 billion. And they have absolutely nothing to do with advertising. This is one company. Google owns another similar company with the name Jigsaw. There are other companies all funded in the zucking billions. So this cyber insecurity guy says that you're all giving yourselves self-importance by being concerned about privacy. Well, possibly over a couple of $100 billion is now invested in companies that think you are important. Not as individuals necessarily, but as a society. Let me tell you about companies like Palantir. Aside from the social media data sourced from big tech, Palantir has access to government data. They even have access to driver's license databases with your photos or the license plate trackers on the freeway. The reason this company has even greater access is that they have government contracts to use this information for behavior modeling. Did you hear this, folks? Companies like Palantir, Jigsaw, and others are filled with data scientists. Their job is to model behavior. In case you don't understand what that means, Let me give you an everyday analogy. Advertising. Online advertisers are trying to influence you to buy their products, but there's a limit to what they can do. The limit is that they only know your interests based on what Google allows them to see. Now, a Palantir is a completely different animal. They have total information, just like Google, Facebook, and Apple have total information about each of you. What do you think the behavior modeling will allow them to do if they know your every thought? Palantir has already revealed some of their capabilities. In case you already forgot about Cambridge Analytica from 2016, this company, with the help of a Palantir scientist, modeled the personality profiles of 50 million US Facebook users. Cambridge Analytica then used this information to target the election. Yes, that was early stage and also late in the election cycle for its application. But understand that an attempt was made to influence the election with better data. We are in 2022. The data is even more refined. Palantir, for example, sold their services to the city of Los Angeles to do pre-crime. They used their data to find potential gang members in LA. By tracking the movement and associations of these individuals, it gave the LAPD a list of people which it then used to harass those people, mostly young people, and gave them fear. I don't have to judge whether this use of data in this manner is proper or not, but it tells me of the capabilities of Palantir. Google has a similar enterprise, and I will not go into too much detail since I'm doing this video on a Google platform, but I hope you research this independently, and I have some old videos about that. Suppressed, by the way. Google knows each of you by your Google ID, and this is matched to your phone. Google knows where each person lives. Google knows what each person is thinking. Google has a map of individuals who are anti-vaxxers, anti-Hillary, incels, QAnon, and so on. If you already recall, the FBI even labeled parents complaining about the school curriculum as domestic terrorists. I'm sure Google has a map of these individuals too. You might say, well, that's okay. I don't like those kinds of people anyway. They deserve to be identified. Well, just to make it clear, Palantir is owned by a right-wing billionaire. Google's owned by left-wing billionaires. So what I'm talking about here has no political side. Behavior modeling is a tool to control a population, just like China has suppressed resistance from the population by switching opportunities on and off for favored or disfavored people. When you give data to large entities like a Google, Facebook, Apple, Palantir, you are basically saying that it is okay to be manipulated. It is okay for these companies to amplify certain ideas, restrain other ideas based on what their modeling will show about what you will do. Data scientists are involved here. In other words, this is a science. This is not some amateur operation. I remember the history books complaining about subliminal message testing in the movie theaters, where quickly flashing messages were used to influence people. Maybe this was in the 60s. They were concerned about mass manipulation back then. And today, all the tools are ever so powerful and combined with almost total control of information flow. So if Google, Apple, and Facebook in concert agree to allow only certain thoughts on the internet, they will succeed. Yes, not all will fall for it, but there are so many people with nothing to hide and feel no self-importance that they will just agree with what they will be told. Remember that the opposition view will always be restrained. This is the power you give to companies with information about you. The main culprit to the control of our information is that they know who you are. Let me explain this clearly so you understand the problem. The reason Google can point out everyone on a map based on an idea is that everything you do is attached to a Google ID. The reason Facebook can similarly identify everyone precisely is because Facebook is based on a real identity that is crowd verified. The reason Apple can know exactly what you all think as well is because Apple has the Apple ID. I understand the standard defense of Apple, by the way. Apple is not in the business of selling data. Not true. They may not be in the obvious business of selling data for advertising, but as a government contractor, they give access to this data, paid, of course. And the iPhone is the most advanced surveillance device in the world. It is a dangerous device with tracking and control features not found on any other phones. If a government gets access to Apple data, which by the way was made clear in the Snowden revelations, then that data will end up in companies like Palantir, another government contractor. The main identifier of your activities is your Apple and Google ID, which is on your phone. Your phone is also tied to your social media sites via two-factor authentication. Something I've explained repeatedly is that data only is not enough to do behavioral modeling. The data has to be associated with a particular individual, and that's why it's important to combine that data with an identity. Having data recorded and tracked repeatedly has no benefit if big tech does not know who owns the data. Again, this is just some basic characteristic of data that is needed by data scientists. The data must be accompanied by an identity. About de-Googled phones. The reason I push de-Googled phones and Linux phones is because the phones emit no identity. They have no Google ID, no Apple ID. Even for 2FA, Google actually captures both the phone number and, more importantly, the phone serial numbers to verify who you are. This serial number capture is not possible on a de-Googled phone. To be frank with you, I know no other kind of device that solves this problem. Without emitting an identity, even if they track your search activity, assuming you do not log into Google, your ideas would be unclassifiable. Now, obviously using a de-Googled phone without caring about your identity in social media and the posts you make will not help your privacy. So a full privacy plan is still needed. You will need to use different identities on social media and not have them connected to the identity of the phone. A de-Googled phone or a Linux phone is part of the toolkit that allows that. Shut down the identity leak so you can control what the internet sees about you. A look back in history. Unfortunately, a lot of younger people in this generation have been brainwashed by Zuck and his ilk. Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel, who are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, both agree that people do not deserve personal privacy. You can add Bill Gates to this as well. In Peter Thiel's mind, the security of the state is paramount, and for that to be maintained, individual privacy has to be canceled. This was also Bill Gates' view, by the way. Zuckerberg is not motivated by state interests, on the other hand. Privacy will not make him rich. The whole idea of Facebook is the introduction of a new social structure where there are no secrets. Quite a naive view, because once the data is collected, somebody wants it. Some of Palantir's main customers are financial institutions. They use the behavioral data to predict what you're going to do, so they make money in the stock and money markets. Google had an active plan that manipulated search results based on their profile of your beliefs. The problem is that people forget history and how identifying people's beliefs led to various disasters like ethnic cleansing by Hitler and Pol Pot in Cambodia, for example. Historical examples in the US include the McCarthy era in the 50s, where left-wing people were blacklisted, and the Nixon era, where gay people were discriminated against in government jobs. Today, the FBI may label you a domestic terrorist and put you in a surveillance list. Notice that history has no political side. Whoever was in power could have used a system for identifying people. Is concerning yourself about privacy a paranoia based on self-importance? The problem is bigger than that, unfortunately. One individual concerned about privacy among so many makes hardly any difference. The problem is that the privacy threat comes from the very people you associate with nothing to hide. It is the folks who do not care about privacy that may impact an election, because they don't have all the facts known to them before voting. You've already seen how information can be censored and suppressed by big tech. But this is even more powerful when the message is individualized or market targeted. This is common knowledge to marketers selling you products. The problem is that your data is also tied to the people around you. Your contacts may define your identity. Even locations now are tracked by iPhones near you. There are associations that can be made just by who you're in contact with, especially if those people do not obfuscate their identities in any way. So the problem is not about self-importance or paranoia. The threat is very real, and the only way out is to suppress the data mining algorithms. It is practically impossible to suppress the data, but it is not impossible to suppress identities attached to that data. The more people who understand this, the less the data importance will be to big tech and the data mining corporations, the less their power. Don't be ignorant. The world is more sophisticated than some of these anti-privacy pontificators on the internet. Cybersecurity is not privacy. A big corporation wants cybersecurity so they can track what all their employees do. True privacy is at the individual level. Privacy is a thoughtful choice both for you as an individual, but also because you care about our society. It is not based on paranoia or a feeling of self-importance. Again, thank you to Louis Rossmann for bringing attention to this. He has a very big channel and he's on the correct side of the argument and mostly reacting from his intuition. Thank you to all for listening and see you next time.